especially with the economic downturn on this summer issue.
Right.
Summer
Let me talk a little bit on summer rentals. When that when the regulations came into effect, I want to say 2.5 years ago, roughly about that. It was before I came onto council. I was in the audience. I don't have a summer rental, but just my background in, I wasn't even politicking at the time, but just my background in land use and zoning, because I used to work with the Department of State on these and with the county of Otsego. The worst approach you could possibly do with any land use is a shotgun approach where you just dribble it and sprinkle it a little bit in every single district. And all it takes, it's an easy way to do it because it's sloppy, it doesn't take any thinking, everyone gets the same proportion. The problem with that is some communities are better suited for it than other communities, and that's why you have zoning. And if you had zones where, you know, a business owner as yourself could come in and say, okay, this use is allowed. I can have every single house here be this, but in this zone, it's not allowed, so I can't have any there. That, you know, at least you know what you're getting yourself into. And that's all I was asking for. Good regulations, bad regulations, at least you're putting them in certain areas that, you know, the housing stock or the community, the parking circumstances in the area could absorb that use. There's nothing different than between a short-term rental and a long-term rental except the public perception. You know, if the property is well maintained, if the tenants, you know, and laws are enforced such as noise and garbage, pretty much anything should be able to fit anywhere. And it all comes back down to objective criteria, what you were trying to get in the regulation originally.
So do you have any plans on, as mayor, maybe making a change to that ordinance?
There's most definitely, right now we're working on making changes to the short-term rental ordinance. By redoing the zones, we have better than 22 zones and then floating zones in the city. And what we're trying to do right now is get it down to a more manageable 9. And the reason you want it down, because what you'd rather have is more zones with less zones with objective criteria than more zones that have been created just as you know, as needed to protect, you know, certain political interests. So we're looking at objective criteria for all types of land use and rentals, short-term rentals, senior rentals, student, whatever, is objective criteria. You know, bedrooms are 12 by 12, you know, parking spots are 9 by 16. You know, if you have the land, then, you know, you can, you know, 1 parking spot per bedroom or whatever the criteria ends up being, at least you know what the criteria is. Right now, it comes down to subjective criteria or a ruling by, you know, our municipal leaders, our councilman, our mayor, and that's what we're getting challenged on, and that's what we lose on because that's subjective. It's very, very difficult to say this use isn't allowed if it meets the general guidelines that we have established right now. The problem is the guidelines we have established right now, what we're finding is what we knew coming into this, they don't fit everywhere, and certain communities are better suited than others to absorb any type of land use, especially rentals.
So besides reviewing, well, what I get is that you're going to review the entire zoning arrangement, and as it applies to all the regular rentals, summer rentals, and so on and so forth. They try to make it more objective. Because right now it's kind of open-ended, where they can decide any way they want on any property, and I think that's wrong.
And the burden comes down to the property owner to challenge the city.
That's right.
And guess what?
Not only the property owner may have invested umpteen dollars and then has to go to court and spend another $4,000 or $5,000, and it's just
as a property owner, a property owner that lives in the city, you get to pay twice. You get to pay to challenge the city, and then in your taxes you get to pay for the city to be fighting you. So right. it's twice you get it. And
this is
sorry for bringing that up. It's tough. And
what major changes would you make? I mean, if you had your druthers, what would you like to see that would help the student and the landlord populations?
Well, first of all, students are residents. A rental is a rental. Doesn't matter if it's over 60, students, professionals, they're rental properties, and we have to get that notion out of our mind that a student rental is a bad thing, or any, you know, a student rental is different than any other rental. They're not. They're all the same. If they meet the same criteria, it doesn't matter who we rent to. It all comes back down to most of the complaints you'll ever hear about. You know, I have students renting next to me. Is the garbage, the poorly maintained property, and there's only a small number of rentals that are like this, but what they do is they smear the whole rental industry. If these property maintenance issues were taken care of, that's 98% of the neighbor complaints. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back is the night of noise, the party, the one drunk kid that runs into your fence. Okay, these accidents always happen. People are always going to be noisy. I have 3 little girls. 7 in the morning when they're screeching. That's noisy.
Sure.
So what's the difference between my girls screeching at 7 in the morning, or my young neighbors having a party at 11 o'clock at night? It's the same thing, different time of day. It all comes back down to we're all residents here, and we'll have to learn how to be neighborly. I know when people move in next to me, I have a fraternity house next to me. And I'm raising 3 daughters, so I don't know how long I can live there, but I'm a little scared being a father of girls.
Yeah.
First thing I do in September is I walk my 3 daughters over, and I introduce myself to my neighbors, and my daughters realize, and I talk to them about what do you do if there's ever an emergency, and you can't get to a phone or don't know what to do? Run to their house. Why? Because there's always someone there. There's, doors open, and you can...
So if we don't discriminate against the students and treat them as a second-class citizen, which I'm 100% for, how do you feel about the law that was just passed in regard to the family definition and preventing too many students living together?
Yeah.
And how would you change things? Or
Right, the family definition, that was a tough one. We were getting kind of beat up. When I say that, I mean we were getting challenged repeatedly on the definition of family and limiting the number of unrelated individuals in a house. The reason is because we have zoning that allows rooming houses, which would be separate rooms, and then we have regular single-family homes.
Right.
So really it's poor zoning and definitions of those properties that were creating the problem. Because some zones allowed rooming houses, some zones didn't. And what we were getting was a quasi or de facto rooming house in single-family neighborhoods. Now, the new family definition allows for unrelated adults, for unrelated individuals in a property. What we're trying to show with the definition is, this is original intent was this is family neighborhood, low impact living, which is hard because I can have 3 kids and my wife, that's 5 people in a home. So what's the difference between 5 related and 4 unrelated? It gets a little tough there. But the idea is, a lot of times in those homes, you have 4 unrelated people, and all 4 of those people have vehicles, or have the potential to be driving and having vehicles. If all 4 people are unrelated, and they all invite 2 friends over, it's a little different than a family, inviting a few friends over, because it has the potential to expand and have a change in character of neighborhood. The definition, still 4 unrelated individuals, it should still come down to what the house can carry, what occupancy would hold. Like I was saying with the new zoning regulations that we're working on, the idea of, a bedroom is 12 by 12. If you have that, then you can rent to 1 person. If you have 2 12 by 12s, you can rent to 2 people. And if you have the parking that goes along with it, objective, then you know what you're doing. The problem is some of our larger homes, and what we have to watch out for is we have huge houses, huge Victorian houses in the city, and what's the loophole if we're going to knock you down to 4 individuals in a single family home? Well, let's take these grand homes and split them. Now architecturally we just ruined a structure. If 2 families allowed, I'm going to split this house, and now you're stuck with me renting to 4 on this side and 4 on that side. It's going to be a problem, so what we're going to have to do is make sure that the regulations that we pass address the 4 unrelated individuals, but also to have some sort of variance ability so that we're not ruining historic housing stock, and that we give options to landlord. Because if we don't give you any options, then you're stuck doing things that you don't want to do and we don't want you to do.